Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Aaron DeVore. I'm the chair in Transgender Studies and your host for today's event. And we start at the University of Victoria with a territorial acknowledgement, and we acknowledge with respect the Lekwungen-speaking peoples whose traditional territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Songhees, Esquimalt, and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. This event is one in many that you will be invited to this year, which is the 10th anniversary of the founding of the Transgender Archives. Transgender Archives was officially launched in fall 2011 at a joint gathering of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health and the Southern Comfort Conference and the U.S. Gay and Lesbian Medical Association. I now want to introduce you to Syrus Marcus Ware. Title of his talk is Touch Change, What I Learned at the Transgender Archives. Syrus Marcus Ware is a friend of the chair in Transgender Studies and the Transgender Archives. He is a Vanier scholar, a visual artist, an activist, a curator, and an educator. He uses painting, installation, and performance to explore social justice frameworks and Black activist culture. His performance works have been part of festivals across Canada. He's part of the Performance Disabilities Art Collective and a core team member of Black Lives Matter in Toronto. And his ongoing curatorial works include That's So Gay and Blackness, Yes, Blackorama. So in this talk, Dr. Syrus Marcus Ware will be exploring the role of archives in community building and remembering who we deem as inherently valuable.
Thank you so much, Aaron, for that introduction. And thank you to the Transgender Chair and to the Trans Archives for the chance to come back. I was so excited to see the announcement of the 10-year anniversary and want to congratulate you on 10 incredible years of bringing our stories to life. We so need this, especially now. I'm coming to you from Toronto, from the part of Toronto that was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase. That makes the area that I'm in the unceded territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. This area is Three Fires territory. It's also home to several great peacekeeping systems, including the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Dish with One Spoon Wampum. Some consider this area part of Treaty 13, although as I mentioned, this part was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase. It's an honor to get to come from these territories to join you out on the west coast of Turtle Island. I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I want to take you through my experience at the Trans Archives, which has just been so incredible. So yes, my talk is called Touch Change, What I Learned at the Trans Archives, but the subtext is how to find home and community through the archive as a space for remembrance and joy. And that's definitely what I found when I came home to the Trans Archives. So I'm somebody who's been very interested in the idea of archiving, in the idea of how and what we remember. I was part of the Marvelous Grounds Collective, which was a project run by Dr. Jen Harita-Warren out of York University that looked at Q2 BIPOC histories in Toronto and in particular looked at this idea of the archive and the possibility of counter-archiving, of remembering in different and new ways. We ended up creating two book projects through Marvelous Grounds, the book Marvelous Grounds, Queer of Color Formations of Toronto, and the book Queering Urban Justice, which explored queer and trans space making and history making in Toronto. Through my work and love with Marvelous Grounds, I really fell in love with the archive. I had perhaps what Dorita would call archive fever and or counter archive fever maybe, and I was really interested in exploring the archive as a site of resistance and possibility. I ended up writing an article that got published in 2019, but what was written earlier around the time that I began my engagement with the Trans Archives, and it was called All Power to All People, Black LGBTTI2QQ Activism, Remembrance, and Archiving in Toronto. And what it looked at was the absenting of QT BIPOCs, so queer, trans, Black, Indigenous, and people of color from mainstream white archives. And, I was somebody who had gone to a lot of archives to look for my community and my history and hadn't found it. And so through Marvelous Grounds, we realized the importance of starting to collect our own stories, to collect our own histories, and to build out a narrative because the mainstream archives hadn't done a terrific job at collecting the stories of BIPOC folks here in this north part of Turtle Island. So through this research, I interviewed Monica Forrester, a Black trans artist, activist, organizer who is based here in Toronto, who started an organization called Trans Pride Toronto, which you should all know and check out, and has been doing street-based outreach with trans folks and trans sex workers for almost 30 years now. And I interviewed her for this article. And one of the things that she said, I wish we had back then, thought more about archiving. And I wish we had sort of held on to the pictures and the flyers and the posters. And of course, the reality is that, but she said, the reason why they didn't was because they were so focused on survival, because life and livelihood wasn't guaranteed. Right. So I was thinking, but of course, the reality is that there was archives at that time collecting and amassing queer ephemera, but just not collecting that of trans people, and in particular, not collecting that of trans people of color. So there was someone else who was not interested in the archives of Monica Forrester and her allies. And so this is the work that needs to be done. So anyways, I ended up getting to spend a significant amount of time under the mentorship of artist, Indigenous activist, and transformed great-grandmother, Ayanna Miracle, and got to spend the last year of her life working with her in mentorship. And I became familiar with the Trans Archives because when I was working with Ayanna near the end of her life, we asked her this question. She was very interested in this, wondering how and in what way she was going to be remembered. How do we be remembered after we pass on? And so she wanted to have her things, the ephemera from her artistic career, the ephemera from her life, packed up and put together, and a large portion of it sent to the Trans Archives because she wanted it to have a home there. And there is this incredible, you can see on the screen here, this beautiful image of Ayanna, I think smoking maybe, in a beautiful pose. But there are some incredible works now from Ayanna Miracle in the Trans Archives, and we sat together. These are some bones that you can see on the screen that were used in one of her performances. We actually sat together, some family of hers, chosen family, and we packed up her things. We cataloged her things. We put them in boxes. We labeled them, and we shipped them off to the Trans Archives for safekeeping and for preservation, so that her memory would always be remembered. So I was familiar with the Trans Archives. And then in 2017, or to early 2017, I had a conversation with curator Vanessa Kwan, who's a gender variant, a curator, and now director of Grunt Gallery, who was very interested in my work in archives and asked me if I'd be interested in doing a project that rooted archives at its core. And of course, I was all over it because I have archive fever, or counter archive fever, and I was really interested in this idea. And I said, well, I know where I want to go. I want to go to the Trans Archives. I want to go and see if I can find our stories there. I want to go and see if I can find a sense of home. When I was doing research with Marvelous Grounds, I had interviewed a self-proclaimed sort of white queer elder who had done significant things in our community. And I was being interviewed by him for a magazine, and I was talking about trans women of color leading our movements and being so foundational in some of the early organizing in the late 1960s and early 1970s in the States, but yes, here in Toronto as well. And when the interview was over, the microphone and the tape recorder was turned off. He leaned forward and said, that's not true. There weren't trans women of color there. I would remember them, and I don't remember them being there, so they weren't there. So this idea that the white gay story is the story, and our story keep getting erased. So I was really interested in upsetting this narrative and saying, hold on a second, we know that Marsha P. Johnson existed. We know that Miss Major exists. We know that, as Miss Major says, we are still fucking here. We know that we existed. And just because we weren't considered important enough at the time for mainstream archives to collect our things, or for white gay historians to consider us worthy of being remembered, doesn't mean that we weren't there. So I wanted to go to the Trans Archives to look for a little bit of home. So I arranged it with Aaron. It was an incredible process. And with open arms, they said, yes, come and explore and see what we have. And I packed everything up and headed out to Victoria to explore in the archives. Aaron said to me, I want you to know the archives are largely shaped by who donates work and what is collected. And of course, there is going to be a lot more content collected by white trans folks or around white trans stories because of the way that the world has played out in the last 500 years. But I'm going to help you try to find some BIPOC folks in the archives. And that's in fact what we ended up doing. So what you see here is some of the writing and ephemera from Reed Erickson, who had a prolific collection in the archive, which I did pour over out of fascination. And this is a post that I made on November 23rd in 2017, after spending days in the archive. I was really thinking about this idea of how and in what way we're going to be remembered. And if you've ever spent time poring over something like Reed Erickson's life collections, you're remembered by particular things, meeting notes and scraps of ephemera and legal documents and those kind of things. So just asking our trans kin how they want to be remembered when they go, and what things they want to have around them as objects of remembrance, and in what ways do they want to be remembered. So I was thinking about this idea of a life translated into a box of ephemera, and what that does and is doing, and what it might mean for us to think more actively about how we want to be remembered. So I turned to Aaron. I said, yes, and Michael. So thank you to Michael also at the archives and all of the staff there. They were so incredible, and they pulled out some incredible resources for me. They said, we don't have maybe the largest collection of BIPOC stuff, but here's what we have. We want you to get to explore. And these objects were incredible objects. The object you see on the screen here with this book that was an object that was an installation all at once with this beautiful, 3D lips. There was a book that had these beautiful images, which I'm going to show you in a minute. And you'll see on the Trans Archives pinned image there, you'll just see them going through the book as I go through this. But there were these beautiful books, The Gender Frontier as well. And I ended up stumbling on this image of a Black trans person, trans feminine person, sitting on the ground at a protest. They've got the police department barricades behind them, and they've got this sort of sign with this protest, and they've got a pamphlet with them. And I was just struck. I mean, I found I'm an activist, I'm an organizer, and I found what I was looking for when I found this image. And I kept looking and kept digging deeper. But this image is going to come back again later in the presentation. I was like, wow, trans activism is alive here in this image, in this moment, in this archive, in this place in Northern Turtle Island that is this hotbed of activism. There was also just such beautiful, gorgeous images of glamour, of joy, of style, of BIPOCs taking up space, of trans feminine people taking up space, of us being ourselves unapologetically, page after page of these beautiful, gorgeous images of trans racialized people, celebrating their lives, taking up space. Some, really saucy. I love this image of this Black trans masculine person, smoking in the garden, just, obviously like they know that they got it going on and they're unapologetic about it. Just these beautiful, really striking images that offer an insight into BIPOC trans life in a particular moment in time. And I was just so captivated. I would come every day to the archives and just keep poring over these images, trying to understand. One of the things about counter archiving is you try to understand the story behind the picture, the sounds of the club where this person dressed up as a devil eating an apple. What was the music like, and what was the sound like, and what did it smell like, and was it smoky, and what was it like to be there? I just pored over these images and fell in love with these documentations. Now, I around the same time as I was exploring and delving into these images in the books and sort of exploring and delving into these images in the catalog and in the fawns, this incredible song came out. I was at the Trans Archives, coincidentally, during Trans Week of Awareness, and Vivek Sharia had put out this beautiful song, Love Is Not Love, that is about trans racialized trans women, two-spirit, indigiqueer, non-binary, and trans feminine folks, with this beautiful line at the end that says, "Very really, if I disappear, come find me." And this song is so much about being remembered and how we're going to be remembered. I'm just going to play. So that was this you should totally listen to it's a banger. You should listen to the song. It's called Love Is Not Love by Vivek Shreya's group To Attached. This image features Kai Cheng Tom, Kylie May, and Raven Wings, all together as this image, this sort of fierce image. But it asks this question about, are you going to remember me? And are you going to make sure that I don't disappear, that I'm not one of the disappeared? And it is this call to action. It came out while I was poring over these images in the archives, and I listened to it on repeat, and it really made me think about this question: in what way and how do we want to be remembered? And how are we going to ensure that all of us get to be remembered, and that the stories of racialized, Indigenous, Black, BIPOC folks are captured in the archives, and to make sure that trans folks are celebrated in these spaces. So anyways, at the end of my time at the archive, I gave a lecture about what I was just preliminarily starting to think about in terms of research and exploring. This is me with Professor Devi Messina, who's a prof out there, and some of the other folks who came to the talk. Can you, it's so nice that this talk is a hybrid talk today, and we have, folks in the room live, and we also have folks on Zoom. This was a live talk, and I definitely miss those. But this was a beautiful chance to just explore and talk about what it was I was finding in the archives and what I was looking for. Now, I will mention that one of the other things that happened as an unexpected outcome of my research in the trans archives, looking at these glamorous images and these beautiful pictures of trans people taking up space and, putting on their lipstick and sitting on cars and laughing with their friends and just being, doing their nails and just being unapologetically trans, led me to start taking and documenting my own image and trying to think about how I want to be remembered. So on the left, I have an image that I took just after a long day in the archives in 2017. And on the right, I have an image of myself from very recently in 2021. Definitely feeling more confident and owning the image more unapologetically, thanks to my time looking up to these figures that I was experiencing and exploring in the archives. So this idea of touching change, I was very moved by my time in the archives. And one of the things I was thinking about was thinking about how I might be able to bring the archive to life for folks who might not have had a chance to come to Victoria or have had a chance to come to the McPherson Library, and how to bring some of these people into existence, into the lived world again, as a way of doing systems change, of saying, hey, trans people have always existed. We are here, we are amazing, and we are part of this world. This was part of shaping and touching and shaping change. I took this phrase, touch change, from Octavia Butler, a Black speculative fiction author who wrote many, 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 many books, including Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. And in this book, the main character, Lauren Olomina, has this phrase where she says, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. And later on, she goes on to say that we should touch change. We should actually put our hands on change. So in the same way that I'm saying we need to put our hands on the archive, we need to activate the archive. We need to, these beautiful BIPOC trans folks who are in this archive, all of that incredible material of Ayana Miracle that's been donated to the archive, all of these things need to be animated and activated and lived again, in life. So thinking about this idea of touch change, I ended up deciding to make a mark on myself to always remember this moment in Victoria, this moment at the archive. And I ended up getting touch change actually tattooed on myself to really commit myself to this idea that I was going to do everything I could to touch change, to kind of create the kind of world where trans people got to live long enough to become elders, where trans children could urinate and pee anywhere that they needed to, and where trans lives were assured. And that's where I came to the title eventually for this exhibition that I'm about to describe at Grant Gallery. Now, I'll mention that Walida Imarisha, who's a Black speculative fiction thinker, she wrote this in 2016. Whenever we try to envision a world without war, without violence, without prisons, without capitalism, I'll add in without transphobia and genderphobia, we are engaging in speculative fiction. All organizing is speculative fiction. Organizers and activists are dedicated to creating and envisioning another world or many other worlds. What better venue for organizers to explore their work than science fiction? So she says that all activism is speculative fiction because we're daring to dream that another world is possible. So I was really interested in using speculative fiction and this idea of the future to understand what I had learned in the archives looking at the past, as a way to imagine a future world where the figures that I saw in those glorious images were freer in a future place. So I created an exhibition called 2068. It was set in the future, 2068 Touch Change. And it was held at Grunt Gallery, which is an artist-run center and gallery in Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh territories in Vancouver. It was curated by Vanessa Kwan. So again, the person who had invited me to do this exploration and where I had said, please, can I go to the Trans Archives? And what I did for this exhibition was to return to this image. To return to this image as a central image where I imagined her in the future. I imagined this trans entity in a future world where they were protesting and they were part of a movement that successfully transformed our social world, our society. So I created this speculative fiction story that the exhibition was premised on. So drawing on Walida Imarisha's idea that daring to dream that another world is possible is speculative fiction. So why not dream into it? So I created the story that started, in the end, it was Black in the end. Black people, Black power, Black magic. We started a revolution with our Indigenous siblings and siblings of color, and we went out in the blackest of nights and lit the fires of resistance. And it goes on. So this story, this is a broadsheet that we created as an artist multiple in the exhibition. But this story that I created, we ended up, this is what this I'll actually just show you the whole story. So it's as I say, we started resistance. 50 years ago, we stopped the ghastly Black Death spectacle spread across the media by taking the fight, and we fought and we won. As Assata Shakur said, we were. And we began rebuilding our communities, creating and ensuring self-determination of all living beings. 50 years ago, before the fires of change spread rapidly across this continent, visual artist Syrus Marcus Ware in the northern part of Turtle Island to research Black trans histories in this place, to explore the archives of our lives. And so it sets up this idea of a future archive. So we gather to remember a time in the past when things weren't rooted in Black power as they are today in 2068. The archive of our past, of 2018, of 2025, of these key moments, this archive is yours, it is all of ours. We must put our hands on the archives as we remember what has happened here in this place. All power to all people then and now. So this text, we actually ended up writing on the wall of the gallery. So you'll see the drawings are installed here, which I'll talk about in a moment. But there's actually text that is spread across, and you can see part of it being written here. The volume slide on this, but you can see part of the text being written here. We ended up projecting the text onto the wall and drawing out the speculative fiction story so that in the middle of this visual art exhibition, there was a speculative fiction story that imagined a future where trans people were free, where the archives were activated, and where all of us had our hands on the archives and were engaging with them. So this is the text spread out around the gallery. You can see it was up and down, and it sort of told this whole story. And this was the broadsheet that we created to make it. Now, I had this idea that I wanted the text written across the top of the wall of the gallery, but hadn't quite thought through that this was going to mean that I was going to have to climb on the tallest ladder known to humankind and get all the way to the top and actually draw and color in these letters. So this is me conquering my extreme fear of heights and my experience with vertigo and working to color in the letters. So these were drawn directly on the wall and told this story about a Black trans future where everyone had survived. This drawing was also drawn directly on the wall. So I worked with a scaffolding, and I chose to draw her, this person larger than life, a little bit larger than human size, to really honor and celebrate this activist, this unknown activist that I found in the Trans Archives in the basement of the McPherson Library at University of Victoria. To draw this human, I ended up working with graphite, and I drew directly on the wall on a tall scaffolding. drawing from source material that I had gotten at the Trans Archives. This is me, a little bit of a time lapse of doing the drawing. It was a chance for me to study and to really consider this human and to try to understand what led them to that protest. What led them? Had they been protesting all day? Had they just sat down? Had they just arrived there? You know, did they know? Were they? You know, what was it that they were? What was on the flyer? What was on the pamphlets? So just really thinking through. I chose to leave the poster board and the flyer blank so that you could imagine it was filled in with whatever activist content that you wanted to imagine. So you can see the rough texture of the drawing because it was drawn directly on the wall. So this is the process. And again, this is coming from this beautiful photograph that I found in the Trans Archives. And there's the finished drawing, and there's me at the opening. Again, we went out in the blackest of nights and lit the fires of resistance and revolution. Now, along with the drawing directly on the wall, there was also drawings and portraits of Black, queer, and trans, mostly trans, and gender nonconforming people spread out throughout the exhibition space. These were all folks who had a relationship with British Columbia, with Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territory, or Squamish territory, or Lekwungen territory. And this is Miski Noir, an activist and organizer. This is Keisha Williams and Dainty Smith and Melissa George, all organizers who have organized based out of either Victoria or Vancouver. This is a portrait of Hampton Gabrant, who's a musician and an artist and an activist who's organizing in Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territories in Vancouver, and who I got to spend time with in 2017 when I was out and documented them, and actually ended up drawing 2 portraits of them for the exhibition. This is Maria, who's somebody who I met when I was exploring Salt Spring Island, because I also did a little mini archive within the archive trip where I went to Salt Spring Islands to see about the archives of Black history on Salt Spring, because there's quite a hotbed of Black history that happened on Salt Spring Island. So I went on the trail trying to find stories and history, and I met Maria, a Black woman who was organizing and working there, and drew this portrait of her. She actually ended up coming all the way down from Salt Spring to the exhibition opening, very, very pregnant, maybe about to give birth any moment, but came all the way down to get to see her portrait. And it was amazing to get to reconnect and to get to be together. I also got to draw portraits, and this is a little bit of a process shot showing you how it went, of drawing Lady Kona, Nubian Imp, who's a non-binary artist and activist, Black activist based again in Vancouver, and who I got to draw just in this moment of sheer joy, which is again amplified, sort of responding to what I found in the Trans Archives, which were these images of trans joy and trans liberation in the BIPOC images that I found. And so I got to capture Kona's joy in this moment. And then this is us together in front of the portrait. And what I loved about this was that, in this moment of laughter, in this moment of explosive Black, queer, and trans joy, we get to see the moment of possibility. We get to see the future. This is me leaving the exhibition opening with a similar smile to what Kona had on her face. And I think that it's good medicine coming together and gathering in these spaces and remembering that there is space for BIPOC joy and that we need to center BIPOC trans joy always. We had a couple of folks come up to see the exhibition, including Leah Lakshmi Piepsina Samarasina, a non-binary organizer and activist who's based in Duwamish territory in Seattle. And this is us just sort of in front of some of the exhibitions. But anyways, I wanted to tell you a little bit about the process. So I returned to that song, Love Is Not Love, when I was working on these drawings. I was thinking about my time in Victoria, and that song really punctuated my time in the archives because I was listening to it over and over. So I listened to it on repeat while I worked on these drawings of, activists, Black activists who were organizing in British Columbia. This is Omi Shrey Dryden, who organized and lived in Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh territories in Vancouver, and went to UBC and is now chair in Black Studies at Dalhousie University, but spent a lot of their early grad time in British Columbia. So these are some of the process shots of this portrait of Omi Shrey, which I got to draw while listening to Vivek Shreya's Love Is Not Love. Again, here is Melissa George, who's an activist and organizer who is based out of Victoria, and who I know now is at Nottingham, and I think just got transferred to be a prof at Oxford, and is doing incredible work in organizing. And I got to capture their portrait. They're a non-binary Black academic, and you can see the text goes through. There's the portrait directly on the wall, and then you can see the other portraits. We chose to have the portraits staggered, have some of them high up, have some of them low, have some of them so low that they were touching the ground. As a way of kind of having the viewer be able to kind of go up and down and follow this story about futures and about touching change and about putting our hands on the archives. This is a portrait of Troy Jackson and Alfred Kaki, both who have long history in Vancouver, organizing. Troy is a musician and activist, and Alfred Kaki is an activist and human rights lawyer, a refugee and human rights lawyer. And this is a portrait that I got to do of them. And again, these are just some more shots, again, of the gallery with the text and the portraits. So just before I left Vancouver and finished off the process when I had first visited the archives, I did an artist talk at Grunt Gallery, and I got a chance to work with Kona again, who is a visual artist and a performance artist. And together we talked about performance art as trans and gender nonconforming people. And we got to talk about being Black in British Columbia, and we got to talk about all of the things in between. So it was great to get to experience that and to get to do that as well. So a talk at the archives in the beginning of the project and a talk at Grant at the end of the project. So my time at the archives began in the beginning of Trans Awareness Week. I actually went to the McPherson Library. I saw in the intro that we showed at the beginning, there were little clips about the great things that you can do with the archives, including Nacho Night. And I got to go to a Nacho Night, and it was incredible. I got to meet other trans people through Aaron and Michael. I'm so thankful for those connections. And I got to fall in love with these beautiful, glorious, gorgeous pictures of BIPOC trans folks who are in the archives. And what I'm hoping for is that others are going to now go to the archives and be able to experience Diana Miracle's work and be able to experience some of the collections that I just told you about. Go seek out these books, Trans Cuba, The Gender Expression, and Diana Miracle's work, and see how we can put our hands on the archives and get involved with touching change. This is how the project began, and this is how the project ended. This is me and the curator and one of the portrait subjects lying on the ground of the gallery at the end of the exhibition, totally spent because we had given it our all. So that is what I learned at the Trans Archives. I learned that there is a home, that there is space for BIPOC stories in the Trans Archives at UVic, and that space is growing larger with every donation. There is some incredible works there, and the staff and team are there to help you find whatever you need. For me, I was interested in an artistic exploration, so I was really interested in these images and trying to understand them better by drawing them larger than life. You may have a different area of interest and a different curiosity. I would encourage you to visit the archives and to follow that curiosity and explore where it takes you. Thank you so much again to the Trans Archives for supporting my research, for supporting my work, and congratulations again on 10 incredible years. Thank you.